Tony freaking.
Oh, I didn't know about Tony Robbins. He's a friend. Huh?
When I talked with Tony for the first time, he shared with me that he used a study that he heard from me in his book, right? He was working on a new book and he saw a video from me that inspired him to put that data into the book.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? This is so cool. Like, and it's just like, where is our focus? Where is our attention going?
My guest today is the host of the Model Health Show. It's the #1 health and fitness podcast on Apple Podcasts in the U.S. He's the author of such bestsellers as Eat Smarter, Sleep Smarter, and the newer book, Eat Smarter Family Cookbook. His website says that he can help you maximize your potential and create a body and life you love. Well, what's not to love about that? He's also an old friend. I'm talking about Shawn Stevenson. Shawn, welcome to The Inspired Life.
Ooh, I just love the name of this. I love the name of this show.
You like that? The Inspired Life. You seem like a guy who leads an inspired life. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I don't know if there's any other way to live.
Right.
I think that it's really tapping in with life itself, but of course we can go through phases when we're not feeling inspired.
Sure.
But, just even the past couple of years and all the changes for a lot of people, we kind of go through our ups and downs and sometimes we can lose track of that inspiration. But I'm a big student of lexicon and language and,
cool.
But inspiration, it's in spirit, and just being able to have that practice to keep reminding yourself that this is what it's all about.
Oh, cool. One of my questions that we'll get to a little bit later is, what you do to stay inspired and motivated. So folks, if you're watching this, please stay tuned. I'm going to be asking Shawn all kinds of stuff, certainly like the latest breakthroughs or things that you're excited about related to health and fitness, things to avoid to improve your health. I'm definitely going to be asking some like business related questions about how you built your business. But first, we have to talk about the early stages of your work when you were here when you were in St. Louis, where I am, born and raised, in the role that my wife Pookie and I how we interacted with you. And I'm going to go back to, I have this very distinct memory. It was the summer of 2008. And for some reason, I remember that I was taking my daughter and her friend. She was a lot younger then, of course. She just turned 28, but back in 2008, I don't know how old she was, but middle school or something. And I was taking her to the Jonas Brothers were playing in concert at the amphitheater here. And Pookie dropped us off, and she was going to go then to this workshop. They said this guy's doing a workshop on raw food or plant-based diet or something, and it was at the Center for Spiritual Living. And that's when I believe she first met you. And then not long after that, I got a chance to meet you. But do you remember those early interactions with us?
Of course. Yes, it was transformational, for me. I was just at the time working as a nutritionist. I was working at the university gym that I graduated from. Yeah. And I started to I had this thing of, I need to reach more people. And this one-on-one thing I'm doing is great, but it wasn't scalable, for the change that I saw needed to take place. And so I started doing these nutrition classes and meeting Pookie and of course meeting you. And so much has come from that I'm excited to share, because I don't know if you often have a student of yours here on the show, but I put myself in that category.
Yeah, rarely. Sometimes I feel like, George Bailey in that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, where, he wonders if his life even matters. And you find out all the impact he had, if he didn't exist, And so there are times when I realize I've been doing some of this stuff long enough that I've interacted with enough people along the way who have gone on to do some pretty cool things. And you were definitely one of those people. But back then I remember, so I know I was certainly involved in the stuff, but Pookie in particular really took to you. And I remember she was going to these different workshops. Like we went to a thing that you did, a demonstration at your mom's house, not far from our house, where she did some video recording. You came over to our house here where we still live and made a plant-based meal. And we took photos of some of the food. I think for a book you were like the first book wanting to get out. I think a photo that she took on our deck ended up being maybe the cover or something, or you ended up using that as a promo photo. So we were, and I know she was leading that. I was very supportive of it, but I got to hand it to her. She saw something in you, because I think she was into David Wolfe or something around that time, and she was really drawn to this message of how food is our medicine. And you, sir, were very instrumental in us becoming pescatarians. You gave us the protocol, and that fall of 2008, yeah, we were pescatarians. And so I want to thank you, the influence that you've had on us. But yeah, humble beginnings. And you certainly have gone on to do some pretty amazing things, sir.
Yeah, well, thank you. Again, just that interaction, I don't feel like that was an accident, and there were certain gifts that I was bringing to you guys' lives, and you guys brought gifts to my life, because at the time I was, again, thinking about how can I impact the lives of more people in a positive way. And one of those aspirations was to create a book. And lo and behold, I'm, of course, hanging out with Pookie, and she's supported with the photos and, coming through and coming to the classes and all that stuff. And her husband has written books, and he's
a lot of them.
Books.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how did you do that? You know, and I can sit at the seat with the Oracle, and get this data downloaded to me. And you taught me about ISBN numbers and lightning source and self-publishing and all this stuff. And I'm one of those people where if you give me the baton, I'm going to run with it,
Yeah.
And at the time, I was still kicking around ideas of how to do this, because as you mentioned, I had a certain framework of nutrition that I was teaching at the time, which was more geared towards raw food, which was more plant-based, and just giving people another way of looking at food and nutrition. And so, but with that being said, I had this aspiration, because in college, it was kind of really my favorite thing to do was literature and writing. And so I kind of had this proclivity towards that, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. And so initially, with the knowledge that you gave me, I actually did a self-published version of a book prior to my main books. And, it was one of those situations where I didn't do a print on demand. I didn't completely listen to you.
Oh, boy.
And so I end up getting this big palette of books. And, we have this thing of like, if you build it, they will come. The book is going to change the world, all this stuff. And you know how certain albums can go platinum or gold? Right. That first book went wood. All right.
Stayed on the wooden. So I was like,
exactly.
Yeah.
It did not have the reach. And at this time, though, it was because I was simply going on the strength of, I write a book but I didn't know the marketing behind that, that came later. And so, but I had picked up these tools from you once it became something that was truly applicable, which was I started my show within those couple of years after that. So right around 2011, I started podcasting.
Yeah.
And so I built up my show. In 2013, I actually lost the show that I have now, but I started being the face of another brand for a couple of years. And we can even maybe circle back and talk about that. But once I built this brand and became the #1 health podcast in the United States, and this was about a year after doing the show, but I'd practiced 2 years prior on a different show. And now I had a platform, and I also knew about the power of marketing and educating through this platform long before everybody that's listening to podcasts now. And so now when I write a book, now I have a platform and a marketing strategy. So I took what you taught me and we did a print on demand, self-published version of my first. This is, again, for me, this was my first book. The other book was just kind of practice.
Right.
And now also I understood how to write a book and structure and being very punchy and separating things and cohesive ideas. My first book was just a flow of consciousness, to be honest, which was great. Some people to this day, which I hope they don't find this book, people send me messages like at least once a week. People are like, hey, I found this book at, some dollar store, whatever. I'm just like, oh my God, this book is amazing. It changed my life. I'm just like, I don't know how I did that. So but cut to my first published book, which was Sleep Smarter. And so I self-published this book and I just got on a mission to educate people. I was doing a lot of podcast interviews and of course, using my own platform, my own show. And that book sold, which most people don't know some of these stats. Like most books sell less than 1,000 copies,
Right. Especially self-published ones or independently published ones for sure.
Yeah. And I didn't have any reference point with that. So my ignorance was actually to my benefit because I sold almost 10,000 copies of this first self-published book. And I still didn't know what that meant. Right. But I went to a mastermind at a friend of mine's house And at the time I was kind of shopping around for expanding the reach of this book. And, I was talking to a couple literary agents at the time who worked in the health space, and they were like, I don't know about a book on sleep. This is 2013-ish.
Yeah.
Right around then. And, a sleep wellness book had never become an international bestseller. It had never happened. New York Times bestseller, never happened. All right. So there's like, you should do a book on fitness or something else. I'm just like, no, this book is what's missing in the health equation in this marketplace. And so even though I was kind of getting pushed away by those guys, I went to this mastermind with the credibility of selling almost 10,000 copies. And that's where I met who was soon to be my literary agent, which he had worked with all of these like incredible authors. And I was sharing a little bit about what we'd done. And he was just like, what? You did what? And long story short, he took that book and our results. I got 11 offers from major publishers, including the big 5.
Wow.
11 offers. And it became a bidding war, basically. It was an auction. These publishers are going back and forth trying to see how much money they were going to give in order to get me to sign with them. It was insanity. I'd never been to New York City before, never been in an Uber.
Wow.
I'm going from meeting to meeting to meeting. It was the most incredible experience, but it was like something that was 10 years in the making. And I ended up signing with Rodale. Sleep Smarter became an international bestseller. And we got 23 separate foreign book deals, separate translations of this book. And it changed the marketplace. Now, sleep wellness is a big part of the health conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Other books have come out since.
I hear about it all the time. Yeah. That's how important sleep is. I didn't realize it wasn't a thing until just more recently. So good for you to be for being a trailblazer. But this story here, it illustrates how a lot of people hesitate and they wait to get everything perfect before they even start taking action or start pursuing their dreams. And so I have this phrase that I love. It's give yourself permission to be messy. You're not going to know everything right out the gate. So just give it your best shot, and you learned a lot through that one book that you're now embarrassed by, even though some people are like,
it's good to be embarrassed by something you created early on because you said it exactly. And then I'll just share the name of the book. It was The Key to Quantum Health.
Okay. So I remember that now. Yeah.
It's like quantum mechanics into it with some nutrition. It was just a lot. It was a lot for somebody to really comprehend, but it gave me an opportunity. And by the way, I kept on not publishing the book because every time I would revise it, like fit, like, okay, I'm going to check out the fit. I would make a huge change to it because I'm coming back to something with my updated consciousness, my updated awareness. And I just kept changing things and delaying publishing it. And eventually I got to this place where I just have to publish it. I cannot review this again. Just publish it, get it out there, get all the experience, get the feelings, get the wins and the losses and learning what works and what doesn't work. And I carried that into the next book and something really special happened. But it took me to just have the courage to publish this first thing, to go through all the things and not have something, quote, perfect, to create something that eventually became a masterpiece.
That's great. That's an awesome life lesson. Do you know how old would you have been in 2008 when we first met you?
In 2008, I was, wait a minute. I was trying to math.
That's
okay. In 2024. So I was 28. I was
20. 28 there. Because on your website, you said, and you probably told us this story way back when. I know it's part of your kind of your origin story, but it says when you were 20 years old, you were diagnosed with something called degenerative disc disease. And it seemed like it was kind of a hopeless situation that you're going to be just burdened with this thing for the rest of your life. This was part of your health journey you discovered on your own, turning to nature. So you'd already been at that maybe for 8 years when we first met you. It was probably soon after this awakening that you had. And that was a big part of how you discovered the path that you're on now, right?
Yeah, exactly. My health really started breaking down when I was around 15. And I was one of the top athletes in my state. I went to one of the top athletic schools and also for academics as well, Lafayette High School in St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, yeah. I ran a 4.5 when I was 14 years old. Everything was looking really good, but I was at track practice when I was 15 doing a time trial with my coach and I broke my hip just running because my bone density was so low. My bones were so brittle. when you hear about somebody breaking a hip, you usually think about somebody much older. It was just like I was aging myself so rapidly because most of my diet, most of my meals, probably upwards of around 85, 90% of the food that I was eating was newly invented, ultra processed, fake food. And that's just the food culture that we had, the environment that I was living in, living in the inner city and living in poverty. This food was very cheap. It was accessible. It tasted good. And so I remember so many days, even at school, in high school, during those days, I'd eat some cereal for breakfast or some mini muffins and, get a Powerade because I was trying to be healthy. I don't want to drink soda. And for lunch, I'd get a personal pizza with a pretzel and cheese. And then, for dinner, we'd probably have fast food. And it's just like I was making my tissues out of this garbage, really, really low quality stuff. And so my body just started to break down. And eventually, as you mentioned, at 20, I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, where my spine was essentially, I had this really severe arthritic spine, and my disc in between my vertebrae were deteriorating. And so I was in a lot of pain because all those nerves run right through there. Loss of function, my leg really wouldn't fire correctly. And so I was just in a lot of pain. It didn't make sense, and when I went to my physician at the time and asked him bluntly, and this was one of those things where it might've been like a Back to the Future moment, like myself now went back in the past and jumped into my body to ask this question because I had no grounds to really ask him, does this have anything to do with what I'm eating? Should I change the way I'm exercising? Right? And I asked him this question and I remember it like it was yesterday. He looked at me, he cocked his head, looked at me like I was from another planet. Like, who are you? What do you mean? And he said, this has nothing to do with what you're eating. But he wrote me a prescription to eat some pills anyways. This has nothing to do with what you're eating, what you're putting in your mouth, but go ahead and put these pills in your mouth, and today, of course, we've made huge changes in the field of healthcare and wellness. And I'm grateful I've been a part of that, where these conversations are now being had, where physicians are now appreciating the fact that every single cell of our bodies is made from the food that we eat. So it matters immensely. Now many of my colleagues are like the top cardiologists or gastroenterologists or neuroscientists. And they're in their education for 12 years, they'll go to school and to become a cardiologist and be the top award-winning guy, do thousands of surgeries. But he's not taught, as he's studying his patient's heart and their arteries and the makeup of their blood, that he's looking at, when he's looking at his patient's heart, he's looking at what they've eaten. When he's looking at their blood, he's looking at what they've eaten, and what we typically get. And I'm a nutritionist, so I chose to take nutritional science class, but for a physician, it's really elective. They're taught very rudimentary things about nutrition, mainly like if your patient develops, a rare B12 deficiency, this is what you do. Or, it's just like really very basic stuff that doesn't really have that moment of like, wait a minute, as I'm studying this mitochondria in biology class, this is made from our menu. When I'm studying the nucleus of my cells, it's made from the nutrients that I eat. So there's this break from biology and what we're studying and the realization, I'm looking at food. And so, that's really been the catalyst for my work. And, long story short, with my recovery, it was 2 years of pain, so many different medications. I developed all kinds of other stuff as a result of the medications and the continued prescription to not do anything. The worst thing you could do is to do nothing. Not only did my spine atrophy, now everything else did. I gained a bunch of weight and I was just in my mental health, it was tragic. But thankfully, this is a big part of my mission now, really coming full circle, is it's always people. It's with and through other people. I had good people around me the whole time. I had a friend of mine when I was in college at the time, at 22 at this point, and she was in chiropractic school. And I just thought she was so weird. She was kind of hot, so I hang out with her, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was just like, whatever, what is this? She invited me to a friend's party one time. It was a bunch of chiropractors and they were doing adjustment. And I'm just like, you guys are just so weird. But it wasn't an accident. It was after I made a decision to get well. After the fourth physician told me there's nothing they can do to help me, I decided no matter what, I'm going to find a way to be healthy, and the reason was I had something to inspire me, my grandmother, who kept calling me, checking on me, getting on my nerves, being a grandmother. She knew that I was not okay, but I kept saying I was. And she was really invested in me becoming the special person that she saw in me as a child. And I didn't want to let her down, And also I had my son, Jordan, my youngest son. Yeah. I was born around that time. I'm sorry, my oldest son. And I wanted to be a good example for him. And so it gave me these reasons. It was in people to find a way. And within a week, we were driving somewhere and she wanted to stop at Wild Oats. If you remember Wild Oats was there in Ladue.
I do. Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, what is this place? This is super weird. Like why is there grass on the counter? They're making wheatgrass, right? I'm just like, this is so weird. But me being somebody who was acclimated to research and all this stuff, I was in school and I just went right over to the books and I looked up my condition and there's one particular book that had a bunch of different conditions and nutritional prescriptions for these things. And I was like, oh, this is a peer-reviewed study on bone density. Like, I didn't know that this mattered for bone density. I thought it was all about calcium. I didn't know I need K2 and vitamin D and omega-3s for absorption of what? Nobody ever told me this. And so I started putting the pieces together of what I was lacking in my education and in my nutrition. And so I just started flooding my tissues eventually different ways through food and supplements with all the things my body needed to rebuild me, rebuild my spine, improve my bone density. And it was shocking how fast I got well. I was scared to death, Bob, because it was 6 weeks after that moment of going to Wild Oats. I had lost 20 pounds. The pain was gone that I've been in every day for 2 years. That was what all these drugs were. So I was scared to take a step. I was like, I do not want that pain to come back. So I had to recondition myself to be free in my own body again, but that was really the catalyst to help other people because so many other people were told the same thing.
Yeah.
This is your diagnosis. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's simply not the case. There's so many wonderful things and things that we have access to today more than ever that can help us to heal.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And it's like you had this awakening to a new way of looking at nutrition and realizing what you eat, and you did the research, did the reading, saw the benefits, probably did more research. And then like a lot of people, when you benefit from something, oh my God, I've discovered this thing. I want to share it with other people, right? And that's at the point that you came into our lives when you were starting that outreach, doing these workshops and wanting to get the word out. And boy, did you ever. And I remember the early days. I don't know which podcast it wasn't called Model Health Show then, but Shock City, I think it was their local recording studio. I think you recorded there some of your earlier episodes. And before I knew it, we kind of lost touch with each other. And then before I know it, you're like on this whole nother level, which I was just so thrilled and proud of you for doing that. And I've seen that you've either interviewed these people or you've been guests on their shows. But I've just made a short list here, like Chalene Johnson, Lewis Howells, Ed Milet, Tom Bilyeu, Jim Quick. These are all people that you've interacted with, either, like I said, either guests, you've been you've been a guest on their show, or you had them on yours. So what was that like to be able to meet these people that you probably was part of your research as you're coming up and you get to rub elbows with them? That had to be pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, I got chills right now, Bob. It's so crazy how powerful we are, because many of the people that I was learning from afar, at the time when this transformation happened with me, I lived in Ferguson, Missouri.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most glorified kind of food deserts in the United States. It's just, there's a lot of stress in the environment. There's a liquor store every corner. There's just so much stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many things that are just kind of vying to kind of denature our mental wellness as well. And so I was learning from Tony Robbins. I was learning from, Dr. Mark Hyman. Now these are my friends.
Wow.
Tony Robbins. Tony freaking.
Oh, I didn't know about Tony Robbins. He's a friend. Huh?
When I talked with Tony for the first time, he shared with me that he used a study that he heard from me in his book, right? He was working on a new book and he saw a video from me that inspired him to put that data into the book.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? This is so cool. And, it's just like, where is our focus? Where is our attention going? And I was so invested in learning. I was so invested in gaining this knowledge from people who had figured some things out. And I didn't know that my successive steps would lead me to being in their lives and those being friends and colleagues. Michael Beckwith.
Well,
let's talk about that for a second.
Well, in 2008, when we met that summer, we met him for the first time. Pookie, as you probably know, started a choir inspired. We got to know Michael. And of course, we officiated our wedding because you were there in a really weird happenstance kind of way.
I haven't seen you in years. And then the day that you'd happen to be at Agape, we hadn't been there probably a month. We weren't actually going to go that week, but just things just lined up like, let's go to Agape today. And then you were there getting married.
So
how is that possible?
This is a little inside baseball for those of you who are watching this. But yeah, my wife Pookie and I were in LA, and we always wanted Michael to marry us. Even though we've been together at the time for like 17 years, and we did it after a service at Agape, the church that he founded. And I think he mentioned Pookie from the stage. You look at your wife Ann, you go, "Pookie, is that our Pookie?"
Yeah,
who's you talking about?
It's my exact word.
And then it was us that we connected. We saw you after the service. We said, "Hey, he's going to marry us upstairs. You want to come up and be part of that?" And so that was just the craziest thing. That was like a year and a half ago. So we were meeting him just then, but you were the first guest on his new podcast. Yeah. Another cool thing. Yeah, I know. One more thing. I remember Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income had a meetup in St. Louis like 10 years ago or several years ago. And we hadn't talked in a while, but you knew about it. So you arrived. I go, "Oh, Shawn and Ann." And I just happened to be standing there, and I introduced you to Pat Flynn because I already had a little bit of a relationship with him. And now I heard him say that he hardly listens to any podcasts except yours. It's like one of the only one or two podcasts or content that he consumes. Isn't that nuts?
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy things. Bob, I don't know if you know this fun fact. Okay, so how that happened was once we hit number one for the first time, because we used Pat Flynn's, like, this is what you do to publish. This is the
podcasting,
the microphones you use, all this. We used his data to start the podcast when we started our own, right? And once we hit number one, I sent them a message on Twitter, whatever it is now. And I was like, "Pat, thank you so much. Your knowledge really helped us to be the number one health podcast in the country." Like, and then he messaged back on Twitter, just like, "Dude, thank you so much for that love that you're sharing." But he's like, "There's no way that your show could be number one without you being amazing." Right. And I'm just like, damn, am I? Like, I guess it pretty is, I guess it is amazing. But also, again, like, thank you so much, because without you, you really helped to give us some grace in building this thing and figuring out what to do to start it out. And Bob, Pat and I talk every week.
Really?
We're in a mastermind together every Monday for the past 6 years, I'm going to say.
Oh, so you're in that mastermind. I know that he talks about one. Yeah.
Every Monday, it's just a group of us. We got these kind of diverse, and they reached out to me, right? To be a part of this master. I was just like, "Are you serious?"
Wow.
And so him, and we got somebody who's in the financial space. We got somebody in personal development space. He's in marketing. Got somebody who's a mommy blogger. We got this really great, diverse group of people. We talk every Monday, and one of us is in a hot seat sharing what's going on and talking about some aspirations. And also something really important that I want to share with everybody that we do, which is something we don't get to do often, is to share our wins. Because that's why part of the reason I was so excited to talk to you today, because I don't talk about this stuff. Yeah. I'm usually talking about health and wellness and educating people, right? But I don't talk about like these cool things that happen in my life, that I get to share with that group every Monday.
Oh, cool.
They get to share theirs too. So it really sets the tone for great conversations.
Nice. Let me talk a little bit about, in our remaining time. Again, I think even when we met, I had already had a number of books out on music marketing. I've had a lot of books out for what I call creative entrepreneurs. That was kind of like my identity for many years until I started posting affirmations on my YouTube channel, which is the main thing that I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 years. But yes, I'm fascinated by people that just self-employed or they follow their own path and build a business around it. So you probably don't get asked this a lot either. When we met, you were doing some like personal coaching with nutrition and wellness. But over the years, I know that's evolved a lot. Can you just talk about like what some of your revenue streams are and how they've evolved over the years? Because, we have to support ourselves and earn a living. I'm just curious how you took this passion, this message that you had, and turned it into a business. A little bit about that would be wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. So when I first kind of job or like venture into health and fitness was while I was in school. I was a student at UMSL, University of Missouri, St. Louis. And at the time I was working at the Rams Dome, right there, which is now just a vacant lot. It just seems like I don't know, Gotham City, just like, never mind. I was working at this stadium.
Yeah.
And, I had transformed my health, myself personally. And people were literally coming up to me on campus. Like my teacher, one day I was walking out of the class and he stopped me. He was like, Shawn, can I see you after class? And he stopped me on the way out the door. And he was just like, what did you do? And I'm just like, what is it? I thought it was something to do with the schoolwork. And he was like, you look so healthy. And, of course, like people saw, I didn't just look like somebody who lost weight. I looked like somebody who was radiantly healthy, coming from somebody who really looked like, when I look at old pictures of myself, I look like a ghost. I look very sickly. And so these people started to ask me for help. The first person to ask me for help was a fellow student at the school who was actually the little sister of one of my friends from high school, right? She ended up coming to the college and she's just like, can you help me to do what you did? And I was like, absolutely. Just, can you meet me at the gym, on Saturday? And then she said, well, okay, cool. How much should I pay you? And time froze.
Yeah.
I was, what? Like in my head, I'm just thinking, you're going to pay me for something I do anyways? I just want to help you. And I was like, $7? I said
$7. Wow.
Because I was making like $7 an hour at the Rams Stadium, right? And so, so it's like $7 a session. And so I started off working as a personal trainer. And eventually, of course, I got my certification, all that stuff. And I worked at the university gym for many years. And also like, going to people's homes and all that kind of stuff. And, I went from $7 to eventually 10 and then, 15, 20. And eventually, I was making $50, $100 a session and really working, I guess, as an elite trainer and a strength and conditioning coach. But all the while I was working on finishing my degree, which when I finished, I found my real proclivity, like my gift was, I'm a great trainer. Like we could do this all day and do great stuff in the gym. But I saw that there weren't many great people or people who were really making a difference in nutrition education. And food had really made the biggest difference in my life. So that's where I really started to focus and working with people with a lot of chronic illnesses, and working alongside with their physician and helping people at the time. And again, this is back in 2007, 8, 9. And then right around when I met you, we had almost between 75, 80% success in people coming in with type 2 diabetes and helping them to normalize their blood sugar without metformin, insulin, any of those things. This really helped them to basically put this into remission. But it was through education. And it took a long time though, not for them to get the change, but in education. I would spend 90 minutes, 2 hours with each person and walking them through like reverse engineering. Like here's how your pancreas works and the beta cells and here's what sugar and all. Like I actually taught them what's going on in their body. When they went to their physician, they just get a diagnosis of some drugs.
Right.
They're not learning, how did this happen? How did I develop this condition that is going to kill me? And it's so unfair. And so I took so much time and I loved it so much, seeing people's eyes light up like, oh my God, this is what's happening in my body. And I saw people become empowered. And so that was the catalyst because again, that was not scalable at all. And if you know me, you know that I'm giving 120%. So now I'm like really stretching it myself, taking care of my own life structures and my wife and my growing family because I'm spending so much time with each person. I'm going to their house, doing all this stuff that they didn't quote pay for because I don't care. I just want them to be well. I want them to win. And so eventually, thanks to my wife and her loving nudges, we have to figure some things out to make this monetarily sustainable. And so I had the idea to start doing nutrition classes, which is eventually how we met.
Oh, that's what led to that. All right, cool.
Yeah. And so we started off in my mother-in-law kitchen in Maryland Heights in Missouri.
That's right. It was your mother-in-law, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You call her mom. Yeah. I think I called her mom. So,
you start off, there's 3 people in that first class, and I was terrified. I knew 2 of them well, but I was just so terrified. And it went from 3 people to 5 to 10 to like now her house is lit. People are crawling in, looking around the door, and we're doing this whole like 7-course, whatever, and all the inspiration, like it's a show. Looking back on it, it was just entertaining for people to be a part of because I was teaching as we were doing things. And, and eventually again, we had to rent out a place. We started doing them at different places, Center for Spiritual Living, for example, because we didn't have enough room. And, from there, again, that reaches a point where it's not scalable as well. And also, to be honest, the amount of money we're spending on groceries and what we were giving people, we didn't really make much money from that. This is where everything changed. Was my investment in service and helping people eventually led to, oh, wait a minute, I'm very skilled at standing in front of a room and inspiring people and educating at the same time. And so I started to get asked to do speaking events and maybe getting paid $500 or, crazy enough, $1,000. And so I started to have like that stream of income as well. So I have my nutrition practice. I have the strength and conditioning coach, which I started to like do less and less of. And eventually I ended that. I have the classes we're teaching and I'm speaking, right? So it's all these things. But what changed everything was the inspiration to write that first book on a wellness related book, truly, which was Sleep Smarter. And what I did was I was working as a nutritionist and I stopped doing the other things. I wasn't speaking. I postponed that. I wasn't teaching new nutrition classes. And this was a couple years in between. And I just focused on writing that book. I'd go into my office and write from, we'll say 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., right? And then see people the rest of the day. And my goal was to write this book. And also we work very well, human minds, if we give some parameters. And so I was like, I'm going to write a chapter a day. Mm-hmm. This is a short, punchy book. It wasn't quite a chapter that I would get through. And it took me, we'll just say 45 days, month and a half, 2 months to create this first iteration of this book. But it was very focused. I stopped doing other things and just focused on this thing. And here's my other leverage point. I taught on these subjects on my show, and they are our most downloaded episodes. That's why I chose that topic.
Yeah.
And I took all of the data from that, put it into that book. So it's 21 clinically proven strategies to improve your sleep quality, right?
Wow.
And once that book was published, and I mentioned some of the things that we did, and it was successful, the income that we were making from Amazon suddenly was taking care of all of our bills.
Wow, that's nice. Yeah.
Right. So our mortgage, the light bill, the water, all that stuff was suddenly taken care of. And it was like almost on automatic. And that eventually led to, again, that meeting and getting the major book deal. But that's when I made the decision, because now I have my podcast and I have these books. I'm a published author and I'm very good at this. And it was the toughest decision I ever made in business, in my career, which was to stop seeing people one-on-one. Because it wasn't that I loved it, but I was in love with it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I knew that my real talent was teaching teachers. And so I closed my clinical practice. The first couple of days, it was tough. But within a week, I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? I should have done this. And right. I just focused on writing and doing this show. And now eventually, again, I opened back up and done a lot of incredible speaking events. And I just did a speaking event 2 weeks ago, and it's not $500 anymore.
Right.
$30,000.
Wow. Nice.
Whatever the case might be. And I'm one of the considered top speakers in health and wellness today. And it was all because of that training that I got, not making money, really teaching in front of those people and making food and investing into myself in service and really getting good at something. And then now, again, it all kind of.
That's awesome. It's a great illustration of how success is not a straight line. It's often like a twisted path to get there. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
Can I share this too?
Sure.
About the income. with the podcast, and this is something that I would like really teach on and share over the years. My first year doing my show, I didn't know, and I did it my first year of my own show. I was recording at iHeartRadio there in St. Louis. And no, they didn't even tell me about sponsorship and all this stuff. I was just paying out of pocket in my time and energy. But after a year, there was a company that we started working with, a supplement company, that I was using their supplements. And they became my first sponsor of the show. And Bob, to this day, this is 10 years later, I haven't worked with them in 9 years.
Wow.
They send me a check every month because of the commission from those early episodes that thousands of people go back and listen to every month.
Wow.
Right? From year number 2, because I worked with them from year 2 to year 3 for 1 year. And that is the power of this medium. And so obviously, I started working with other sponsors, and I have one major rule, which is I don't talk about anything that I don't love. If this isn't a part of my life, I have colleagues who get a $20,000 check from somebody. They'll talk about some random thing that they don't even use or know anything about. And I just embed it into the education and find a way to make it fit so it adds value.
Right.
And we've actually helped to build several multi-million-dollar companies who've been sponsors on our show. Oftentimes, they'll literally use what we do to share with other podcasters. Now it's whitelisting. They're taking content from the show and sharing it on social media and making hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales. And so eventually I'd understand my power with this as well and the influence that we have. I would recommend this for people to have. You might have a flat fee for your podcast or YouTube channel, whatever, but I would highly, highly recommend you having a commission structure as well, so that if there's a long tail benefit, you can still get commission from the work that you did to support this company in the first place. And so I've really been trying to press that to people. That's something that wasn't really heard of. And I thought it was kind of obvious, with I just kind of looked at it as like a sports thing. You have your flat deal, then you have some structure where if you hit certain marks, right, gain a certain amount of yards, it's like built in that you also have this other facet of your contract as well.
Awesome. Resume. So I knew that this is going to be a great conversation and I wouldn't be able to get to all of my questions. But here's one. We talked a lot about the joys, the successes that you have earned, rightly. I mean, you worked your butt off for these things. I think I already know the answer. You kind of covered what are the best parts, the most satisfying aspects of what you do. But entrepreneurship is a roller coaster ride. What are some of the most challenging things that you encountered, either currently or in building this business? And what do you do to kind of stay on track and get over those hurdles?
Wow. I think one of the biggest challenges, and also what people don't talk about often, is if you're an entrepreneur, this means that your business is often dependent on you, and also, being an entrepreneur, that means you're your own boss. And how good of a boss are you, right? Do you treat your employees fairly with you being an employee? And taking care of yourself and your mental health and understanding how your family is going to impact, what's going on in the business and whether or not you are investing in your family because of the business, right? And so I don't think a lot of people talk about the human aspect of being an entrepreneur and how important it is to find, and this whole work-life balance thing has been talked about a long time, but it's not about that. It's simply, what are your priorities? And if your family is a priority, you need to, just like you have whatever business thing scheduled, you need to schedule time with them too, because a lot of people lose touch with their families. I just am talking tomorrow with Dr. James Dottie, and he achieved this incredible financial success coming from poverty and lost his family along the way, and just share that story is so consistent. So making sure that you're investing in yourself, being a good boss to you so you can protect your own mental health, your physical health, so that you can do the things. It makes it easier, ironically, to show up and do great work in your business when you get a good night's sleep and when you're fueling yourself properly. So that's really the big thing is, and even for the best of us, it is not necessarily healthy writing a book on health. All right. It's a lot of computer time. It's a lot of time stationary, and I have a standing desk right now.
I noticed that.
Sedentary standing person.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's just, and also just the stress of it, even if you love it, because that's why I fooled myself. I'm like, I could not wait to get the computer right. But it's also something that mechanically in our genes, we haven't evolved to be at a computer all these hours. And so finding a way to give myself those inputs for recovery, and so that I can show up and keep showing up for the people that matter.
And what ways do you stay motivated? I know I was going to ask you that earlier. Do you have like a morning routine? Do you my specialty is affirmations. Do you do those? Do you meditate? Just real quick on remaining time here. What are some of the practices that you have just to stay centered and balanced, motivated?
Yeah, when we met, I was meditating every day for several years. And that is probably the most valuable thing I've ever done. And also meditation, it's not just about the time you spent in the practice itself. It goes beyond that, outside of sitting on the mat or the floor or the couch or wherever you're sitting, but starting to find more meditative moments through the day. Because also I personally, just with all the turbulence of the past couple of years, you can lose touch with that practice as well. Anything. The thing for me that I have had to be my anchor is doing something physical. Making sure that regardless of what's going on, if I don't have time to get to the gym, just giving myself those physical inputs. And that can be a meditation too. I can embed some meditative pieces into there, but our bodies require movement. Our genes expect us to move. And there's so much chemistry, beneficial chemistry that comes from that. So, this past summer, rough time, got people, my wife's father passed away recently. We've got one son who's moving out. We got another son going to middle school, all this stuff. And I might not have time to get to the gym or want to go. Ironically, in 20 years, I've never felt like that. But I want to go outside in the sun, get some fresh air and jump rope. Right. No matter what is going on, I've stayed consistent in having some kind of a physical input every single day. Our bodies need it, and it just keeps you above water. It keeps you above water with everything else going on in life.
That's awesome. Is it safe to say that the best place to find you online, is it themodelhealthshow.com? Is that the website?
That's my home online.
It's there's the at the beginning of it, right? Themodelhealthshow.com. All things Shawn Stevenson can be found there. It's so great to connect with you, my friend. I just want to remind people that are watching this to please subscribe or follow, whether you're watching on YouTube, watching on one of my podcasts, so that you can keep up with all the latest episodes. Shawn, thank you so much for being my guest today, and continued success to you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for being you.
You are welcome. I'll continue to be that because everyone else is already taken.
Facts.
All right, so long, folks.